parents have got off the net. They don't know what they're doing there. One day it's one thing, the next day it's some other harebrained scheme.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't found it to be very fun. It's entertaining. He's a good person to have dinner with. That kind of thing. It'll be good together.
But it is becoming more. It's live.
I was thinking of moving down here with my brother. Back then, more than I was
Where do you live?
I live right in F. So you know like where they have that big wooded area right in the housing? Well, right in there.
I lived in Cyprus, and we lived in South last year. It was quiet. The only thing is
I can give you more.
I'm going to ask everyone to turn off their cell phones in respect of the guest speakers. And we're going to start in about 3 minutes. It starts at 45. So we have like 3 minutes if we need to call someone or anything. Middle East Forum hosted by Progressive Student Alliance, Environmental and Peace Education Center, and the Model United Nations Club at Florida Gulf Coast University. Tonight's speakers range from Florida Gulf Coast University professors to a congressional candidate and a former resident of Pakistan. John Cox is a professor of history at Florida Gulf Coast University, where he also directs our University Holocaust Studies Department. He earned his PhD at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 2005. Dr. Cox will have a book published next year, which is a result of his dissertation and examines Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. He will be also working on a second book that is a comparative genocide. Dr. Cox also teaches Islamic history here at FGCU. Our second panelist, Jeff George, is a contender in this upcoming congressional election. After high school, congressional candidate George enlisted in the U.S. Army as an electronic intelligence analyst and served 5 years in Germany and Korea. In addition to his military travels, George has visited the Mediterranean. In 2004, he produced a documentary in Syria titled Islam, Seekers of Knowledge. Our third speaker is Rabbi Bruce Diamond, who is an adjunct professor here at Florida Gulf Coast University. He teaches civic engagement and critical thinking skills and foundations of civic engagement. Rabbi Diamond is a former military chaplain in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. Rabbi Diamond received his diploma at Yeshiva of Flatbush and received his undergraduate degree from Bard College in Hudson Valley, New York. He is a nationally recognized human rights activist concentrating on the areas of health, care, and homelessness. Our last presenting not least is Joyce Rama, who was a chairperson of the Board of All Faiths Unitarian Congregation in Fort Myers, was a founding administrator of Hajibir University in Lahore, Pakistan. In Pakistan, she authored a political opinion column in a major Pakistan English language newspaper and was involved in the track to peace diplomacy between India and Pakistan. One of the organizations that's helping sponsor this event is Model United Nations, which is a club here at FGCU who aims to educate participants about civics, effective communication, globalization, and multilateral diplomacy. In Model United Nations, students take on roles as foreign diplomats and participate in simulated sessions of intergovernmental organizations. And we just wanted to tell when we're hosting this, and if any students are excited to join the club, let me know. And now on to our event chair, Angela. She's going to add some more information about the other organizations that are hosting this.
Thank you all for coming here. I just would like to take this moment to add that the Environmental and Peace Education Center, also known as EPEC, is a nonprofit community grassroots education and advocacy organization in Southwest Florida. Now in its 26th year, EPEC provides a community of cooperation for individuals concerned about peace and environmental issues. As a member of EPEC, I invite you all to our community potluck at Georgetown State Historic Site on Saturday, December 6th, featuring food, music, and discussion about how members of different organizations can work together on issues of mutual concern. There's also a sign-up sheet if you'd like to sign up to receive updates via your email. Additionally, the FGCU Progressive Alliance is a monthly gathering of students, youth, and community activists at FGCU. The Alliance is a social networking and educational forum for Southwest Florida's progressive community. The monthly Alliance gathering is free and open to the public. Our next one is November 9th. And now to the president of FGCU, Model UN, Ayla Memich, who will be moderating tonight's forum. Thank you.
Okay, first we're going to have Dr. Cox as the first speaker. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes. I'm used to having an hour and 15 minutes. But I'll try to confine myself to 15. And in fact, and I promised Angela and Isla that I tried to set a model of restraint and concision because we do want to try to go through our talks pretty quickly so that we have plenty of time to discuss because there's a lot to talk about and the time is somewhat limited. But anyway, thanks a lot to the organizers. It's very nice to be here for the second annual Middle East Forum because I think I was here for the first annual Middle East Forum. And hopefully I'll be here for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth ones, whatever. Maybe we can start having biannual Middle East Forums because there's too much to cover on an annual basis. But maybe we can have monthly or weekly Middle East Forums or something. But anyway, it's also very nice to be participating and speaking at an event that's organized by civilized and humane people here at FGCU for the purposes of fostering tolerance and rational discussion. Because 23 days ago, there was an event on our campus, or just south of our campus at Germain, that was organized not for humane purposes and not for civilized purposes, frankly. And that was an event at which our sheriff, Mike Scott, is that his name?
Yeah.
I didn't know his name until then, but now I'm going to go vote against him.
Mike Adolf Scott.
Yeah. Really? Yeah, okay. Well, that's right. We'll go with that. But he definitely brought us a certain amount of shame upon our campus through his quite cynical and demagogic Muslim bashing exercise that he engaged in at that time, drawing conspicuous attention to Barack Obama's middle name, which of course was a way of feeding into a bizarre mythology and hysteria that's circulating, especially on right-wing internet sites and whatnot, about Barack Obama being a Muslim and whatnot. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because one thing is that, of course, well, anyway, I'll get into a little bit more about the whole motivation and the resonance of these rumors about Obama. So at any rate, it is nice to be at an entirely different kind of a event. But I thought that that event at that time, it really seemed to be the beginning of at least a week-long kind of hysterical, almost hate fest. It reminded me of, I think, in Orwell's novel, 1984, they had the 2 minutes of hate or something every day. And that's exactly what those rallies took the appearance of for the next week or so, and perhaps to the present day, although maybe it hasn't been covered as much. But it's striking to me that it's easier for opponents of Obama to bash him for being a Muslim than for being black. When I was talking to my friend Bezad right before the meeting, and he showed me a photograph of a bumper sticker that I assume someone slapped on their car without any embarrassment that said Obama bin Laden. And now I saw one bumper sticker that was at least equally appalling that said something like, "Keep the White House white." But I would say that at least whoever put that bumper sticker on the car perhaps had to be a little more embarrassed about it. One thing that can be said in this country for all of our persistent problems with racism is that the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s and beyond at least made anti-black racism unacceptable in polite company, even though, of course, it persists in many ways, both subtle and less subtle. anti-Arab and anti-Muslim prejudice, which of course tend to kind of converge because of ignorance and most people not knowing the difference between Arabs and Muslims, or that not all Arabs are Muslims or vice versa. But this is still entirely acceptable. And so that's why, in fact, even in the last 4 or 5 months, as these bizarre rumors are circulated about Obama, that it's not even possible, even for the candidate himself, to come right out and say, well, first of all, what does it matter if I'm a Muslim or not? There's nothing to be embarrassed about being Muslim. Perhaps I should be embarrassed about being a Christian because I know I'd be associated with various Christian fanatics through history who've committed terrible crimes. So why should I be embarrassed about being a Muslim? Each religion has given rise to more tolerant, universal, and beautiful and noble interpretations, and each major faith tradition has given rise, or at least been usurped by people who would like to use it for other purposes. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with being Muslim. But it's not even possible for Obama in this climate to say that. Actually, I never thought when I saw Colin Powell giving that speech at the UN 5 years ago to promote the aggression against Iraq that I would ever have any respect for Powell. But I must say that he handled himself with considerable dignity. And that speech, or that address on Face the Nation was a week and a half ago, where he did say, this is how this should be answered. I'm not a Muslim, but why does it matter? What in the world is the matter with being a Muslim, and why she's going to be ashamed of being a Muslim? So anyway, the title of my little talk was something about Islamophobia, which is that name, this term that's kind of come about in recent years to put a label on this irrational fear and unreasoned hatred of Islam that has been in full force and expression of late in the presidential campaign and elsewhere. And in fact, this is something that's actually become worse even since the aftermath of 9/11. According to various opinion polls, fear and hatred and ignorance about Islam is actually worse now than it was in 2003, for example, even in the year or so after 9/11, when the hysteria and the fear would have seemed to have been at its height, yet we still haven't really gone beyond this. And of course, it's fomented and promoted by the likes of Lou Dobbs and Glenn Beck and their ilk, who take up a couple hours of primetime television time each evening. And it's not helped too much when newspapers like the News Press, and not just single out the News Press. I'm in the world of higher education. The Chronicle of Higher Education is considered as the most important and respectable weekly publication for educators. The Chronicle of Higher Education also accepted, I think they took $28,000 and accepted the advertisement of the Obsession DVD. And many of y'all probably received that by now. An outlandish piece of hate propaganda. I don't think any newspaper would accept if the Ku Klux Klan said, we'll give you a few $1,000s if you distribute Birth of a Nation, or the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or something of that nature. I would think that any respectable newspaper would say, well, we believe in free speech, but we don't believe that we have to accept advertising and promote hate speech and hateful propaganda that fans the flames of hysteria in a time when people suffer and people are being victimized because of this atmosphere. But again, because of the general acceptance, the continued respectability of anti-Muslim propaganda, bigotry, it was considered perfectly acceptable for newspapers, including the New York Times, not just the News Press or the Chronicle of Higher Ed. Even the New York Times accepted this DVD promotion of this Obsession video. And the New York Times ended up sending it out to their states. I think the funders, the murky organizations that fund this Obsession video, asked them to send it out only in the states that were swing states or something like this, to also to stoke the fear and hysteria around Islam in order to swing more votes toward McCain. So anyway, where does this fear originate? Actually, I shouldn't have asked that question because I've only got about 6 minutes to go. But I will just say that definitely for me, it definitely comes out of confusion and ignorance. And in this way, it's really related to other irrational fears that also gain sustenance in times of crisis, of fear, and time when large numbers of people are looking for some scapegoat and looking for some enemy to focus upon, rather than maybe thinking more deeply and more historically about the problems that a society faces. And so in that way, anti-Islam hysteria is very closely linked, I believe, to anti-immigrant hysteria. And I happen to come from a family of people who came from Ireland sometime 150 years ago or something. At that time, Irish people and Italian people were the victims of anti-immigrant hysteria. And in fact, it even had many of the same motifs and stereotypes were attached to Irish and Italian immigrants They had a bizarre alien religion, Catholicism. They were politically radical, anarchists and whatnot, even terrorists, Irish, because Irish nationalists carried out actions in the 1860s and 1870s that had all the Irish people labeled as terrorists long before the more modern day IRA and whatnot. So even many of the same stereotypes were attached to these people. And again, the idea that they were somehow undermining the fabric of our society, which is supposed to be a white Protestant society, et cetera. Well, anyway, what's worse than immigrants? And of course, in our recent days, probably alongside anti-Arab and anti-Muslim hysteria, anti-Mexican, anti-Latino hysteria is also in full force in recent years. But what could be worse than the Mexican immigrants taking our jobs and whatnot? And by the way, I hope no one quotes me directly if anyone from the news press or legal news is in here, or if I end up on YouTube with a 3-second snippet or something. But I'm saying from this viewpoint of this irrational fear, what could be worse than the Mexican immigrants overrunning our country, than immigrants who come in here who worship a different God and who support terrorism. And this is the type of ignorant ideas that underlie and that reinforce Islamophobia. The idea that, for one thing, Muslims worship a different God, as if that would be that bad anyway, but that happens to not be the case whatsoever. When I teach my Islam classes, Renee or I can tell you, I don't know who else has been in my Islam class, but the first thing I say on day one is, Allah happens to be Arabic for God, it's the same God, et cetera, et cetera. And it's hard for some of the students to ever make their peace with that idea. And it also just happens that, fortunately, only a very small minority of Muslims condone in any way terrorist acts. Actually, probably a larger majority of non-Muslim Americans support state-sponsored terrorism than do Muslim peoples around. And I better not even get into that because I'm going to be off for 3 hours talking about that. But I will just say that, fortunately, of the 1.3, 1.4 billion Muslims in the world, it is a very small minority who support or condone in any way, even justify by referring to a history of oppression, degradation, colonialism of Muslim peoples at the hands of Western powers in the last 100 or 150 years, or going back to the time of the Crusades and depredations against Muslim peoples. A huge majority of Muslims still cannot find any justification for actions of Al-Qaeda or other groups of that ilk. And I think that I've already just about used up my 15 minutes, but I'll just refer, just to support that last point, to something that's not very well known among the North American populace, which is understandable, because I think if it was reported in the New York Times or elsewhere, it was probably on page C73 or something like that. And that is that about 2 1/3 years ago, in July of 2006, 170 leading Muslim clerics and scholars from around the world, representing every tradition within Islam, with the exception of the Wahhabi tradition, the extremist strain of Islam that predominates in Saudi Arabia. Every other school of Islam was represented at this gathering at Amman, and they issued a very forceful, quite unambiguous statement denouncing any acts of violence or coercion and repudiating those who would usurp the name of Islam to justify their criminal actions. Okay, so with that, I was going to talk about Iran, the last 55 years of Iranian history, but I don't think I can do that in the last 45 seconds allotted to me.
4 minutes.
Do I really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
If you want to.
I'll tell you what, I'll just say 2 words about Iran. Because I think originally when y'all were putting together the panel, I think initially this focus was going to be something about Iran. So I might just say as a counterpoint to this idea of Islamophobia, people fearing Islam in this country, I wonder why people in Iran might have any fear of the United States. The United States, people in the U.S. Have a fear of Iran and of maybe Afghanistan or elsewhere, but it may be the Iranian president is going to bomb the United States or something. Well, why in the world would anyone in Iran harbor any anti-American sentiments? Actually, oddly enough, given what I'm about to tell you, most people in Iran don't. Most people in Iran are quite open to Western culture, American culture, film. Iranian itself has a very advanced film industry that's quite intertwined with European and American cinema and so on. But one thing that you should know about Iran, because that's going to be an issue that's been somewhat, actually oddly, it hasn't been that much in this presidential campaign, but it's going to be definitely an issue. It has been an issue in recent years and will continue to be an issue, is that I think one thing, anytime we're talking about the Middle East, which is what this forum is about, we should try, those of us who are American citizens who were born and grew up in this country, should try to the degree possible to imagine, to put ourselves in the position of people, of Iraqis, of Palestinians, of Lebanese people, of Iranians, and to try to, at least to the degree that our imagination allows us, to try to imagine how they might perceive things. Now, in this country, we have some slogan about remember the Alamo or something. I don't even know what happened at the Alamo myself, but that was 160 or 170 years ago. But I know what didn't happen at the Alamo, which is that Mexico did not come into our country and install a military dictatorship under the Shah of Iran that lasted for 26 years. And Mexico did not train a secret service, a secret police force called the SEVAC. Mexico did not, a few years after the Shah was overthrown, shoot down an American airliner, killing 290 people, which is what the U.S. did on July 3rd, 1988, shooting down an Iranian commercial airliner with 290 people aboard. And these are things that, that are known to people of that region. And again, in my last, minute and a half, okay, I can't go further into the history of U.S. policy in Iraq or Iran. But I would just say when we think about Iran or something like this, we should try to imagine what it would be like to be in a country that has suffered. Some of y'all are old enough to remember the hostage crisis when I was speaking at Mohammed al-Jarsani's mosque a couple months ago. Someone got very agitated about the hostage crisis of 79 to early 81. 53 Americans were held hostage by Iranian students. To me, that's a fairly minor injustice compared to an entire country being held hostage for 26 years by the Shah of Iran and some of these other things that I've mentioned. So anyway, I'll just leave you with that thought. I'm sorry I can't develop that a little bit further, but when you do read the news about Iraq, Lebanon, the Palestinian-Israeli situation, Iran, Afghanistan, and so on, just try to learn a little bit more about the history of what those peoples have endured and how they might view the world. And then I think you'll also be surprised that so many, the large majority of those people still have as generous an attitude as they do towards the American people and towards the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. I'm sorry, I should have introduced this topic, and as he said, it was Islamophobia. Next, we'll have Jeff George speaking. He is actually running for Congress, and he is, we're going to show a video first, and then he's going to speak for 15 minutes as well. And his topic will be the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East.
I feel like I'm on Leno here. Let's roll the clip.
Give us like 2 minutes.
Ready? And if we started by Mr. Saunders, do you see a nuclear-armed Iran as a threat that must be mitigated if diplomacy and sanctions do not correct the problem?
Absolutely. A nuclear Iran would be a major problem for the entire world. I'm one of those who believes that we have to rely on our good friends in Israel to keep us informed on what's happening, because they're on the ground there and they have the ability to give the intelligence that is necessary for their very survival. And I believe that at some point in time, as Iran continues to develop its nuclear program, the Israelis are going to make a decision to take that nuclear facility out. They're going to do that because they're going to have to do it for their very own survival. They know that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, it won't be long before it reaches Jerusalem or someplace in Israel. And so we need to support our friends in the Middle East that are working with us to keep Iran from getting a nuclear device. What we need to do right away, right now, is really tighten the sanctions on Iran. Make it painful for them, make it painful for their government to continue to develop a nuclear weapon. Because as they get closer, and we're talking 18 months maybe at the most, as they get closer to this, you're going to start seeing the potential for an attack by Israel, which will destabilize the entire Middle East, but they're going to have to do it. And so whatever sanctions we can impose, we need to do that right away. Thank you.
Ditto. I think Senator Saunders hit that pretty well on the head. I would like to see us focus on the real war on terror. I believe that the terrorists are in the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I believe they are a larger danger today than Iran's current status as in nuclear weapon production today. Now that may change, but on October 11, 2008, that's what I believe. I think we need to support the governments of Afghanistan and Pakistan in their efforts to weed out the terrorists and terminate them. And if they don't decide they want to do it themselves, maybe we should lease those wastelands called the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Just lease them for our own personal use. Didn't we lease an island down in the Bahamas for a bombing range down there one day? And if we lease it, maybe we could, do a bombing range in that area. And on our leased lands, that could help. But that's the kind of ideas I have about the nuclear Iran. Thank you.
Good grief. Training center. This is an oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had answered that.
No, I haven't.
I break your apart.
Yes, a nuclear armed Iran is a problem. Now, is it as great a problem as is being stated? I have questions about that. I would look to General John Avison, who said very frankly and very bluntly that the United States can abide a nuclear armed Iran. Now, what he meant by that, and what I take from that, is not that we want to see Iran develop nuclear weapons. Certainly we don't. That will destabilize the whole region. It is a threat to the political status of Israel, but I don't believe that Iran is a suicide nation like so many people tend to paint it out to be. World leaders, no matter how despotic they tend to be, particularly the despots and the tyrants, tend to be guided by a principle of self-preservation. And anybody in the government of Iran is smart enough to know that if they use nuclear weapons against Israel, that's the end of Iran as well. And I don't think they want to see that happen. Now, what we need to do in the interim is I agree that sanctions are the right course of action right now, but I think we also need to negotiate with Iran. We need to understand that with the Iranian people, there is a strong impulse to maintain this nuclear program, not because they want nuclear weapons, but because they want nuclear energy, because they're facing the same energy problems that we're facing. And as a signature of the non-proliferation agreement, they have a right to nuclear energy. And I think what we have to do is we have to look at a solution that is going to allow them to have nuclear energy with a very closely monitored program of enrichment to make sure that that isn't diverted into to nuclear weapons. But I think this is a good example of a situation where a threat is being exaggerated to keep us all fearful and to keep this country on a war footing that it doesn't need to be on. Thank you.